Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwin, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about Space Marine chapters as we talk about the Storm Wardens. If you guys are new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K content every single day. And of course, if you have any suggestions for Space Marine chapters or specific details of Warhammer 40K that you guys would like us to create a lore video about, please comment that down below. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Storm Wardens. The Storm Wardens is a Codex Astartes-compliant Loyalist Space Marine chapter of unknown origin, located on the forbidden world of Sacris in the Calyx sector of the Segmentum Obscurus. The Storm Wardens are stoic defenders of mankind, often found upon the borders of the Imperium. The Storm Wardens wear blue and light gray power armor. The Aquila or Imperialis on the chest guard is light gray. The Storm Warden's chapter badge is a gray lightning bolt imposed over a blue shield centered on a field of light gray. While many of the chapters serving in the Jericho's Reach, Achilles' Crusade, are well known across the Imperium, the Storm Wardens are one of the hundreds of chapters in existence whose deeds go largely unrecorded, whose activities are confined to a relatively contained theater of operation, or whose histories are as yet largely unwritten. In the case of the Storm Wardens, there is an additional reason why their name is not more well known, a tale of calamity known as the Nemesis Incident, of which few outside the Battle Brethren have any inklings. But it is not just the events of the Nemesis Incident that have kept the Storm Wardens from becoming the celebrated heroes of the Imperium that they arguably deserve to be. Some would say that they have inherited much of the taciturn, even dour nature of their tribesmen of Sacris, from who they recruit aspirants, and this would certainly go on a long way toward explaining why the Storm Wardens appears to shun the laurels they are undoubtedly due. Sacris is a world forbidden to all but the Storm Wardens and its warring clans, who exist at the very pinnacle of survival. They are distrustful of outsiders and utterly relentless in war. The Storm Wardens have inherited these and many more aspects of the culture of the tribes of Sacris, granting them a unique blend of qualities. One of the most obvious manifestations of the chapter's desire to keep much of its identity and its deeds secret is to be found in the manner in which they administer its home world of Sacris. This gloomy world is located within the borders of the Calyx sector, but those gazetteers that even list it describe it as a forbidden world. Beyond its name, most navigators and free captains have no knowledge of the world and no need to approach it. Were they to do, they would be challenged by an outer ring of automated defense monitors, dire warnings against proceeding any further, looped over and over, transmitting into the void. Anyone foolish enough to proceed into the system's inner zone finds something entirely unexpected: hostile patrols of Space Marine vessels. Sadly for the intruders, the Storm Wardens do not repeat the warnings transmitted by the automated monitors, opening fire immediately and with deadly effect. So deep is the chapter's desire to remain isolated from the worlds of the Calyx sector, that the very Calyxian authorities or institutions are even aware that the Space Marine chapter exists in their midst. Exactly how many know of the Storm Wardens is unclear, but certainly the fact is not common knowledge, even in the highest ranks of the Administratum. Lord Marxius Hawks, the Administratum's highest ranked potentate in the sector, does know of them, but how many of their underlings do is unknown. Furthermore, it seems unbelievable that the Inquisition's Ordo Calyx would not be aware of an entire Space Marine chapter operating within their sphere of influence. Yet there appears to be no link between the two groups, formal or informal. While the Storm Wardens are not known to have undertaken any direct mission alongside any agents of the Ordo Calyx, they fought alongside the Inquisitors in many different war zones, which is suggestive of some deeper mystery that may be in play. Perhaps this desire of secrecy is simply a holdover from the habits of the peoples of Sacris, but perhaps it indicates some deeper conspiracy at work throughout the Calyx sector and beyond. The Storm Wardens aided the Inquisition in the operations against an infestation of enslavers, psychic entities from the warp, in the Storpius cluster, What came to pass in the alien Storpius's Cyclops ruin is unknown, but shortly after the Storm Wardens returned to Sacris, something endangered the chapter and potentially the Imperium itself. At the conclusion of the Nemesis Incident, the Storm Wardens chapter master, Owen Glenworm, discussed with an Inquisitor Lord of the Ordo Xenos what needed to be done. A dire decision was made. By the authority of the High Lords of Terra, Glenworm had much of the interior of the Storm Wardens Fortress Monastery on their homeworld of Sacris's moon, High Castle, sealed. All records of this history, the Primarch from which they descended, and the date of the chapter's founding were destroyed or hidden away. Furthermore, the Storm Warden's world of Sacris in the Calyx sector was forbidden to have contact with the Imperium at large. According to the only records of this time that still exist, the sacred history of the chapter called the Libra Tempest, many Storm Wardens, including the entire veteran First Company, and Chapter Master Owen Glenworm himself, were placed in hidden stasis vaults. The chapter's venerable dreadnought have taken vows of silence and stand guard over these hidden chambers. The only details of this event that would later become known as the Nemesis Incident are to be found within the pages of the Libra Tempest, a 77-volume tome describing the deeds of the chapter and the lives of its heroes throughout the turbulent years of the Age of Apostasy. This mighty book was authored by the chief librarian, Bryn Maxon, who had himself become so crippled in body during the fighting that he was capable of no more service to his chapter than committing his wisdom to parchment before his wounds eventually claimed his life. It is said that Maxon held death at bay for almost 12 years as he recited the Libra Tempest to his disciples of the Librarius, each of his followers transcribing his words faithfully. Yet the very fact that several versions of the Libra Tempest were written simultaneously led to a near schism within the Librarius after Maxon's death. When the texts were studied in detail, it was discovered that they differed from one another in several major details. The differences were not mere errors of transcription, but were so great that Maxon's successors came to suspect that some outside agency of deliberately corrupting the transcription process or of interfering with the archives at some later point. Yet the Librarius of the Space Marines chapter would be one of the most secure and sealed places in the entire galaxy, and surely nothing short of supernatural could have altered Maxon's words once they were committed to record. Following the discovery of the divergent account of the Nemesis Incident, the senior members of the Librarius undertook a process of determining which of them, if any, was faithful. This process took the best part of the standard century, and was made all but impossible by the fact of the incident itself. Eventually, one single version of Maxon's account was declared the truth, and the others labeled apocryphal, and locked away deep inside the inner repository of the Storm Warden's Librarium. Each of these divergent tomes became known by the name of the librarian that had compiled it, such as the Apocrypha of Yorath, the Book of Inion, and the Libra Historica Cadfanium. The Libra Tempest detailed the calamitous events of the Age of Apostasy, as experienced by the Storm Wardens chapter. The Nemesis Incident represents a brief but dramatic period within the turbulent epoch, and the Libra presents very few details of this. The root of the incident are to be found in the general increase in warp storm activities that afflicted the Imperium in the run-up to and during the Age of Apostasy. Trade routes, the length and breadth of the galaxy became all but impossible as the warp boiled with turbulent etheric storm fronts. Entire war fleets and crusading armies were lost as the warp routes they traveled were overcome with impossible energies. In many areas, the raw stuff of the immaterium bled through the thin veil of reality and engulfed settled worlds or entire systems. The more fortunate were simply cut off from all outside contact. The less fortunate were saturated in the terrible unreality of the warp. Entire populations spontaneously mutating or falling victim of apocalyptic demonic incursions. Aside from etheric overbleed, genetic mutation, and demonic incursion. Warp storms sometimes bring with them the risk of another thankfully rare but utterly devastating threat. There exist, in the depths of the warp, entities other than what man calls demons. Enslavers are one such form, a nightmarish hybrid of the Xenos and the demonic that exists for most of its life within the immaterium, but breeds and multiplies in real space. Enslavers utilize the minds of untrained or latent psychers, transforming their victims' bodies into vast, distended gateways through which the enslavers themselves pour from the warp. Furthermore, they are able to take control of the bodies of their foes, turning them into drooling mind slaves that fight until overcome by their wounds, exposure, or malnutrition. When warp storm activity increases, so too do the rates of the psyker births. And so the Age of Apostasy was underpinned by a second horror, that of the enslaver infestation. This, much the various version of the Libris Tempestus all agree upon, but the account begins to diverge at the point when the chapter was committed to a region of space known as the Storpius Cluster. For the Space Marines, the Age of Apostasy was an extended period of retrenchment during which the pronouncement of the Senatorum Imperialis were replaced with the irrational dictates of the High Lord Goj Vandire. The vast majority of the Astartes chapter masters became so distrustful of Vandire's pronouncements that they were forced to pursue their duties without recourse to the central authority once provided by the Council of the High Lords of Terra. Where the warp conditions allowed, chapters coordinated their actions with brother chapters, or occasionally with the forces of the Inquisition, yet very few answered the command or demands of the High Lord Vandire. Most versions of the Libra Tempest agree that the Storm Warden's chapter master, Owen Glenworm, took his force to the Storpius Cluster in response to the readings of the Emperor's Tador made by the Chief Librarian, but some texts call this into question, insinuating that the deployment may have been carried out at the behest of the Inquisition or some other faction within the Imperium's shattered structure. Having reached the Storpius Cluster, it is said that the Storm Wardens discovered a swath of worlds entirely consumed by the roiling energies of the warp. Those worlds, lying on the outskirts of the storm, had come under the dominion of the largest enslaver plague the Segmentum have ever witnessed. The chapter master Glenworm was faced with a terrible choice: deploy his warriors in a battle that would undoubtedly prove costly in the lives of his warriors, or grant the doomed and enslaved populations the Emperor's mercy, and scour the world's surface with the nucleus fire of Exterminatus. Once more, the various accounts of the war differ in their description of what followed. The Libra Essortica Canfanius contains a detailed account of Glenworm and an unnamed Inquisitor Lord, exploring a series of ruins across several of the clustered worlds, and this is corroborated by the Libra Tempest itself. No account of the ruins gives any suggestion as to which alien species may have built them, but all describe their halls as black and oppressive, and completely dwarfing even the mighty Space Marines. At some point during the exploration of these ruins, it appears that the Storm Wardens and this allied Inquisitor force came under attack, first by hordes of enslaved humans, meat puppets, and then by enslaver behemoths. The chapter master and the First Company fought a series of desperate battles against the enslavers, during which many heroic battle brothers were lost. 3 entire worlds were cleansed of the Xenos presence, and ultimately the Inquisitor Lord declared the right of Exterminatus on 7 more before the cluster was declared purged of the enslaver plague. In the aftermath of the Storpius Cluster campaign, the Storm Wardens returned to their homeworld of Sacris, yet by a reading of a number of Apocrypha, it appears that the taint had not yet entirely eradicated, and that the First Company had in fact brought it back to the Calyx sector. According to the Book of Enion, a number of the First Company veterans had become corrupted by some form of psychic taint, which was only uncovered during post-battle cleansing protocols. The chapter's most senior apothecaries, chaplains, and librarians turned their efforts to purging this taint, but according to the accounts, the taint was too ingrained and presented a dire threat to the survival of the entire chapter. Initially, the Inquisitor Lord was of the view that those infected would submit to voluntary liquidation, yet the Storm Warden senior officers argued vehemently against such a drastic sanction, and Glenworm proposed a compromise. Having convinced the Inquisitor Lord of the viability of his plan, the chapter master ordered that he and the entire First Company would be interned within stasis sarcophagi in the vaults far below the chapter's fortress monastery, which would not be open until such time as definite cures for the enslaver taint was discovered. The Inquisition placed a condition on this acquisition, demanding that the chapter's homeworld be isolated from the greater Imperium, and that all knowledge of the Nemesis Incident be purged from all records of the Imperium's history. Aside from those of the contradictory accounts presented in the various records, which are accessible only to the most senior officers of the chapter, none outside of the Storm Wardens have any inkling of the tragic events of the Storpius Cluster campaign. There were a number of side effects to the sealing of the stasis vaults and the isolation of Sacris. Firstly, many of the chapter's oldest archives were sealed along with the First Company, so that millennia later, the Storm Wardens remain ignorant as to many details of their founding and the earliest history. Furthermore, a number of legends have evolved around the incident, which form the basis of some of the chapter's more cherished rituals. One such legend states that the long-lost brethren of the First Company will someday return, when the very existence of the chapter, and indeed the Imperium, is threatened. The chapter's belief calls upon its members to be ever vigilant of such a time, and to meet with honor and stoicism every challenge the galaxy can throw at them. The Storm Wardens maintain their traditions to this day, seeking every chance to prove themselves in the eyes of those who they believe will one day return and judge them worthy of standing at their side in the final battles against the maraud foes of mankind. After the Nemesis Incident, the Storm Wardens rebuilt the First Company of veterans. Those who joined its ranks became known as the Inheritors, knowing that they represented their chapter's honor until their ancestors awakened from their timeless slumber and stasis. Ever since the Nemesis Incident, the Storm Wardens have redoubled their diligence, and their fortress monastery of High Castle now mounts sophisticated scanning technology, reluctantly given by the Adeptus Mechanicus, as payment for the ancient pact between the tech priests and the chapter. And those were 40 facts on the Storm Wardens. There's going to be a part 2, so please subscribe to the channel. If you like our videos, if you like this specific video, share this with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, or whatever social media or forum you guys use. The Storm Wardens is an amazing chapter, and it's really funny because art for the Storm Wardens is pretty big. It's easy to find. They're everywhere, yet not many people know about the Storm Wardens. So it kind of plays on their lore, how they're supposed to be one of the better chapters, yet people don't really know about them. And again, there's a connection between Christianity and Warhammer 40K. So in Christianity, you have all these different books for the Bible, some of which are written by some apostles that actually never make it into the traditional Bible, and then there's others that speak of things that completely contradict the basis of some of the books inside the Bible, and those are taken out. So it's the same thing with the Libra Tempest. So really cool connection there. I really like how GW played that lore into the lore. And just as a reminder, we are doing our subscriber appreciation giveaways, so be sure to check out our 40 facts on the Unnumbered Suns, and the video on the top 4 new races of Warhammer 40K for a chance to win. You could actually go back every single day. I would suggest you go back every single day and comment on those videos. That way YouTube doesn't mark you as spamming, and at the same time your chances of winning increase, because we're giving away some awesome Primaris prizes. So check those videos out. If you want to support us a little bit more, jump on over to Patreon. A simple $1 a month helps us create more content for you guys. And of course, if you can't do that, we understand. Simply liking, commenting, and sharing helps out the channel. I'll see you guys tomorrow with more lore on the Storm Wardens. This was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.